Welcome back to the Family Astrologer, a space where we can delight in all conversations related to family dynamics through the lens of astrology. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the intersection of fate and family dynamics. When you start to notice the patterns between an individual's birth chart and the birth charts of their family members, it's some of the most compelling evidence that we have as astrologers for the fact that our existence has purpose, that our existence does have a strong component of fate tied to it. I'm really inspired by a conversation recently between Adam Ellenboss and Chris Brennan, two astrologers who I really respect and am continuously blown away by how smart they are. They recently had a conversation called Fate and Astrology, and that was featured both on their YouTube channels, Nightlight Astrology and the Astrology podcast. And Chris was saying that he is pro-fate, and I just want to quote him here. He's saying that astrology's ability to access this realm of existence of fate, where it can demonstrate that fate exists, is one of the most important religious or spiritual or philosophical things about that implication is that it implies that our lives are not random or meaningless, but that each of us has some sort of life story or narrative that runs throughout our lives and all the events within it. And it also interconnects us with the lives of many other people around us in our family unit, in the city, our generation, and down through the human history, through the past, all the way through the future. And to me, there's something incredibly beautiful about that, which I see that as positive, a net positive thing, even if it has some negative implications with it. And Chris was sort of speaking to the idea that a lot of people feel limited by this idea of fate. They feel like it's negative. They feel like if something negative happens to them, that it's uncomfortable for them to say that it was fated, because as humans, we have an ego and we want to be in control of our situation always. But Chris was kind of arguing that what if the positive things in our lives are also fated? And so you have sort of this net umbrella of positivity, because as he was arguing, a lot of times a negative thing might happen to somebody, but later on, the wisdom you gain from it and the trajectory that it shifts you toward in your life, you wouldn't change it, if you had to choose. So I really loved that conversation, and it really got me thinking a lot about family dynamics as well, and how family dynamics really offers like a really strong and compelling argument toward the vote of meaningfulness around our lives. Because conversely, we could say, all this is completely random. So I've thought about this a lot in terms of choosing our charts, because when we look at a person's birth chart, there are no perfect charts. We talked a little bit about that in our last episode. But yeah, there are no perfect charts. So every single person in their chart is going to have strengths, things that are empowering them, assets, and even indications of eminence. Someone who could be influential, the various circles of existence. And then there's challenges in the birth chart. There are things that indicate ailments. There are things that indicate years. There are timing techniques that indicate, this is going to be a difficult year in a person's life versus this is going to be an easier or a more victorious year in someone's life. And yeah, when we look at that sort of thing, like I've looked at a lot of different birth charts in my years as an astrologer, and there are some people who have objectively more positive attributes in their birth chart. Like you might objectively look at their chart and say, wow, what a lucky chart. Or you might look at a person's chart and say, wow, look at all those planets in detriment. Look at all those planets in fall. That looks really, really rough. And I will say, and I think I mentioned this in the previous one, in some previous episodes here too, is that a lot of times it's like those more difficult aspects actually give a person grit and you can take a challenging chart and accomplish a lot with it. I've also seen people with charts that look really challenging, and if you look a little bit closer, you'll see, oh, there's a lot of assistance going on in this chart. It's actually not as difficult as it looks, that sort of thing. And just while we're on this topic, a lot of astrology books, and even if you've studied astrology with the teacher, will say, you know, a trine in a chart might objectively look like a gift. It might objectively look like an asset. There's a free flowing of energy here within this chart. But the person might get lazy with it versus the square, which encourages a person to do something, to alleviate the tension. You see what I mean? So the line between good and bad in terms of the quality of aspects in any given birth chart is kind of subjective because of that. But this leads me to the sort of more philosophical question of, do we choose our charts? And I think this is something that astrologers have grappled with a lot, is, do we choose our chart? And a lot of times, you know, saying, oh, well, you chose this, you chose your chart, you chose your family, it could be looked at as a form of spiritual bypassing. Like if someone is really lamenting, like, these struggles I'm going through, my life has been hard and it's all here in my birth chart. We want to be careful with that lingo because we don't want to spiritually bypass someone's experience or minimize sort of their experience of suffering because, oh, you chose it, right? That can be really damaging, first of all. And second of all, it's not cool. And we can't always assume that we necessarily chose it. So I think about that a lot of, did we choose our charts? Did we choose our family? And I like to think that we did. I will put that out there. I like to think that we did. I like to think that we have soul contracts with people, you know, that we've incarnated with many times, maybe some of them, and we're working it all out. I like to believe that sort of thing. But it's also important to acknowledge someone's experience in the now, and how saying that you chose that experience isn't necessarily helpful, okay, to that person. But when you look at the alignments between, like, for example, I showed my son's birth chart in the first episode here of how his ascendant of 3 degrees Libra, when that ascendant is moving every few minutes, you know, it's like a clock. Every few minutes that ascendant degree is moving, tick tock, tick tock. What are the odds that his ascendant of 3 degrees Libra is my exact degree of my son? What are the odds of that? I think about this mechanism a lot in terms of familial astrology of, you know, I'm a parent, in the delivery room having a transit. You know, the experience of birth is a transit that I'm experiencing in real time. But what does that mean in terms of, you know, the soul that's incarnating with that chart in that moment? Is that can't be random. His life can't be decided by what transits I'm having, right? So I like to think that there's some sort of connection here between the soul incarnating, getting the chart that they're intending to work with for the rest of their lives, and how that plugs in somehow mysteriously with the transit that the parent is having. We'll continue to explore this topic more on this channel about how a child's birth chart is like a permanent transit for a parent. There's so many different ways we can go with that. So I'm excited to really crack that egg with you all when the time is just right. But for right now, I am just thinking about how perfect and how poetic it is that our charts really fit together throughout the family line, throughout this thread of the family. So taking a couple steps back, just to clarify my point here, is that if I didn't choose my birth chart and my moment of incarnation is completely random, like I'm just drawing straws here, it has nothing to do with anything, then why does that chart plug in to this family unit that I'm now a part of? So I'm not saying that I am an authority on this information. I'm not saying that I have the answers. What I'm saying is that this is some really fascinating food for thought, because if my birth chart has similarity and sympathy with those in my family, then that shows that my birth chart is not completely random, or at least not all of it. Maybe there's certain pieces and parts of it that are really, really intentional on some divinely intelligent level, right? Something that is really humbling for me as an astrologer is contemplating how this mechanism of astrology works. We don't know how it works exactly. We don't know why it works. We have systems that we know work. We have systems of calculations and techniques that are hundreds and thousands of years old that we know work, and they work very, very well. But we don't know like what's sort of behind the curtain. We don't know like who's in charge of this technology, why it works, or where it comes from. We really don't. And that's something that's really humbling about it. And I think that's part of the design, perhaps. But so on some level, I think it's comforting to know that there is a reason. You know, if you have challenges that you're going through and they're described in your birth chart at one time in your life or throughout your life, I think there's comfort in that, potentially saying that, yeah, maybe on some level, I did choose this. Now, the question is, did we choose our family? I'm not sure that this can necessarily prove that, although I think it definitely is a vote of confidence toward that, potentially, because if there's not a randomness about, you know, our birth charts within the family unit, then there's some sort of order going on there. There's some sort of purpose going on. So I would like to hope that maybe on some level we do. So again, I'm not trying to bypass anyone's experience. I'm here to sort of create an environment of contemplation around this. There's no right or wrong answers here, folks. We simply don't know. My whole point is that if we're just randomly incarnating, if our moment of birth is completely random, then why does it match up with all these people that become basically like mainstays in our life and go on to influence us in very significant ways? Now, this brings me to my next conversation around scheduled births and C-sections. So I want to just end this video here, and we're going to sort of continue that conversation over there. So for right now, this was another episode of the Family Astrologer, and I look forward to chatting with you again next time. Bye.